Chuck is away this week, and I'll be preaching. I'm preaching on love, and I'm going to start by reading from Galatians chapter 5, verse 22 and 23. But the spirit of love is joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law. And if you look at the King James Version, it says, but the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control, and against such things there is no law. This verse makes it very clear that love is a gift of the Spirit. This kind of love is unnatural. It stands out as not being normal. At the end of the chapter on spiritual gifts, it says in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 31, now eagerly desire the greater gifts, and yet I will show you the most excellent way. If I speak in tongues of men and angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and cannot fathom mysteries, and I can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have faith that can move mountains, but I do not have love, I am nothing. If I give all my possessions to the poor and give over my body to hardship that I may boast, but I do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices in the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always preserves. Love never fails. But where there were prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part and prophesy in part, but when completeness comes, what is in part disappears. When I was a child, I talked like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put away the ways of childhood. For now we can see only a reflection, as in a mirror. Then we shall see and be seen face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. Now these three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. Okay, what is love? The dictionary tells us, as a noun, it's a profoundly tender, passionate affection for another person. A feeling of warm personal attachment or deep affection, as for a parent for a child or a friend. Passion, sexual desire. As a verb, it's to have affection for a teacher for her students or his students. To have profoundly tender, passionate affection for another person. As a verb, loved or loving, to have love or affection for another person, or to be in love. Those definitions cover normal love. Love that comes from the Holy Spirit is not normal love. Matthew chapter 5, 42 through 44, this is the NIV version. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from anyone who wants to borrow from you. Love your enemies. You have heard said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you to love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Well, loving your enemy is certainly not normal. It's not how we go about things in the world or how people go about things. It's absolutely unusual. This part is one of the areas where we need the Holy Spirit's help. The normal human thing is to hate your enemy and wish him harm. When we express love and compassion for our enemies, we shock the world around us, because you can't do that on your own. It is only by the power of God through His Holy Spirit can we even see the need to love our enemies and desire good for them who've hurt us. Example, I saw on TV a man forgive a man who was convicted of murdering his daughter. And he stood there in the courtroom and said, I forgive you. People just couldn't believe someone could do that. When I was a young man, I lived back in Illinois. One winter, in a snowstorm, a car got stuck out in the snow in a snowdrift in front of our house. My dad, my brother, and I went out to help. My dad knocked on the car window. The man rolled down the window, and we saw that the driver was a Japanese man. I was curious how my father would react. My father had served in World War II in the Philippines and Japan. He'd fought against the Japanese army. When the man rolled down the window and my father saw the man that was in the car, he simply asked, how can we help? He offered to dig him out. He cleared the path in front of the car, and then he and my brother pushed the car until we cleared the drift, and we watched as he drove away out of sight. In 1 John chapter 2, verse 9, it tells us, anyone who claims to be in the light and hates his brother or sister is still in darkness. 1 John chapter 4, verse 20. Whoever claims to love God yet hates his brother or sister is a liar. For whoever does not love their brother and sister whom they've seen cannot love God who they have not seen. This is also true if we have prejudice toward a group of people based on ethnicity, skin color, language. If we display prejudice toward any group, it reflects on our witness and on God, and instills that prejudice into our children. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 3 through 5. If I give all I possess to the poor, give over my body to hardship, that I may boast, and do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. We think of this verse in regards to a husband and wife and how they should love one another. But if we look at the passage as to how we are to love our neighbor or our enemy, it takes on a different dimension. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 5. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. If we consider someone our enemy, we recount their offenses over and over. We're keeping a record. In John chapter 13, verses 34 and 35, a new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. In Luke chapter 10, verses 26 through 37, it's the story of the Good Samaritan. He said to him, "What is written in the law, and what is your reading of it?" So he answered, "You shall love God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength, with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself." And he said to him, "You have answered rightly. Do this, and you will live." But he, wanting to justify himself, said to Jesus, "Who is my neighbor?" Jesus answered and said, "A certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell among thieves, who stripped him of his clothing, wounded him, and departed, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a certain priest came down the road and saw him and passed on the other side. Likewise a Levite, when he arrived at the place, came, looked, and passed on the other side. But a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. So he went to him. He bandaged his wounds, pouring oil and wine on them. He set him on his own animal and brought him to an inn and took care of him. The next day, when he departed, he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper and said to him, "Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, when I come again, I will repay you." So which of these 3 do you think was his neighbor to him who fell among the thieves? And he said, "He who showed mercy to him." And then Jesus said, "Go and do likewise." There's a truth in the Bible that we need to love those who are in need. Jesus instructs us to love our neighbor as ourselves. When asked, "Who is your neighbor?" he responds with this story of the Good Samaritan. We've all heard it 1,000 times. And in many ways, the Good Samaritan is the foundation, example of what it means to be a Christian. Our children need to be encouraged to notice those who are in need around them. Teach them to see and then to act when others are in need. In doing so, we're encouraging them a love that puts others first. The Bible story embodies Jesus' command. Matthew 5:43. You have heard it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. In conclusion, there is human love. It wants, it needs, it desires, it's self-serving. And then there is God's love. The love of God's Spirit in us. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. God's love never fails. We need to choose what kind of love we and will we display to the world, our friends, and our family. Think about love. Think about people you might have called your enemy. Can you pray for them? Can you honestly wish them well? That's the challenge. We need to love one another, even when the person that you're dealing with isn't kind, isn't friendly toward you. They might wish you harm. How can you love them? Only with God's help. God is the one who gives us the strength and the will to obey Him and love the people that are just unlovable. We need to keep that in mind when we're dealing with people. Whether it's dealing with somebody who's just being difficult with us. Whether it's somebody you meet on the street or in the store or on the highway, the gentleman that cuts you off or puts his hand out the window and gives you a high sign. Whatever the circumstance, we have to choose how to respond. Because how we respond, that's what reflects on us in our belief as Christians and on our God that we claim to follow. I pray that you'll have a great week, that you'll think about this, think deeply about who you might have called an enemy at one time, and ask God to give you the courage and the faith to pray for that person, to pray for their good. God bless. You have a great week, and hope to see you Sunday. Bye.